Chapter 21. He turned the car on the Fair Street, cruised a long block, and this time pulled right up the gravel drive to the Corwin house. He had never seen the house in daylight. It looked even shabbier with a bright sun beaming down its faded shingles and fallen gutters. His parents had wondered where he was going so early on a Sunday morning. He told them he had a special gymnastics team workout. He didn't like lying to them, especially when it was such a feeble lie, but he couldn't very well tell them he was driving to Fair Street to find out why a girl's brother was terrorizing him and Lisa and had to try to kill Lisa. He didn't really know what he'd do if Brett answered the door. He'd been up most of the night thinking about it, but hadn't been able to come up with a plan. All night he tried to sort his feelings about Anna. He felt angry at himself for becoming involved with her and her brother, yet he also felt sorry for her, and he was frightened for her. And he was still terribly attracted to her old-fashioned prettiness, to her teasing sexiness, to her everything. All these weeks he had spent thinking of nothing but Anna, and still, to this very moment, she was a complete mystery to him. Well, no more. He was about to unravel the mystery, all of the mysteries. He wasn't going to leave until his every question was answered. He knocked loudly on the door. No response. He waited a while. Ignoring the pounding in his chest and the impulse to run as far from the house as he could, he raised his fist and pounded again. Silence. He knocked again, harder. Then again. He waited. There wasn't a sound inside the house. No sign that anyone was there. More angry than disappointed, Corey turned and started back to the car. Morning. It was a strange neighbor. He was leaning on the hood of Corey's car. He was wearing the same rain slicker and white tennis hat, even though it was a bright, sunny morning. Voltaire, the big Doberman, was at his side. Corey jumped back, then was relieved to see that the dog was on a leash. Don't ever see you much in the daytime, the man said, grinning at Corey. Not exactly a friendly grin, but a more pleasant expression than Corey had ever seen on him. Guess not, Corey said, walking slowly to the car. They're not home, the man said, pointing to the house. Left early this morning. Oh? Corey said. Know where they went? The man seemed offended by the question. I'm no snoop, he said curtly. You seem to know a lot about them, Corey said. The man looked at him thoughtfully. Can't help but notice some things when you're a neighbor, he said finally. You seem like an all-right young man. The compliment startled Corey. Thanks. That's why I can't understand you coming to visit them, he said pointedly. The dog barked. Okay, Voltaire. The man pulled himself up in Corey's car. Be seeing you, he said, giving Corey a wave as if they were old friends, and then trotted off to keep up with his pulling dog. Not if I see you first, Corey said under his breath. Neither the old guy nor his dog seemed as threatening in the daytime, though. Just a snoopy neighbor out walking his dog day and night, trying to see what he can learn about around the neighborhood. Well, Corey had learned absolutely nothing. He took one last look at the old house, then dejectedly got back into the car. He had spent the whole night going over and over what he was going to say, and now there was no one to say any of it to. He spent the afternoon trying to do some homework. He was terribly behind. He called the Corwin's house every half hour. There was no one home all day or all evening. The next morning, feeling nervous and out of sorts, he drove to the school early and waited by Anna's locker for her to show up. But she hadn't arrived when the bell rang, and when he went to his homeroom disappointed again. He didn't catch up with her until after school. Then he ran into her by accident outside the biology lab. She looked for a moment as if she didn't recognize him. Then her expression changed, and she gave him a warm smile. Corey, hi. I've got to talk to you. I've got to go home and... He grabbed the arm. He wasn't sure why. He wasn't sure what he planned to do. He just knew he wasn't going to let her get away. No, you're coming with me. I've got to talk to you. I'll take you home after. She didn't resist. She could see that he was serious. They wouldn't take no for an answer. He led her to his car in silence, pulling her as if she were a captive, not letting go of her hand as if she might slip away and disappear into the thin air if he didn't hold on. He drove to the Division Street Mall. She played with the radio, pushing the buttons in order, listening to a station for 10 seconds, then moving on to the next. At the pizza oven, he guided her to a booth in the back. She slid in across from him, smiling uneasily. Her eyes darted nervously to the front of the long, narrow restaurant. It was quiet. Only a few booths were filled. Most of the after-school crowd hadn't arrived yet. A waitress slouched over to them, cracking a bubblegum noisily. Corey ordered 2 Cokes, then he turned to Anna and took her hand. "Tell me the truth about you, about Brad," he said, staring into her deep blue, mysteriously opaque eyes. "I want to know what's going on. Everything." She didn't question him. She seemed to know that he had no choice, that she had no choice this time. And when she started talking, she seemed eager to get the story out, desperate to tell it to him, relieved to finally have someone to tell it to. "I moved here last month with my mother and Brad," she began, looking at Corey, then shifting her gaze to the front window of the restaurant, then back to Corey. "My father left us, just disappeared several years ago. My mother is not well. She's very frail. Brad has always been the head of the family. About a year ago," she continued, talking rapidly in her soft voice, "something terrible happened to Brad. He was in love with a girl named Emily. Emily was killed in a plane crash. It was just awful, and Brad never recovered from the shock." "What do you mean?" Corey asked. "He lost his grip on reality. He just couldn't take Emily's death. For a while, he imagined that Emily was still alive. We had a sister. Her name was Willa. Willa was a year older than me. She looked like me, but she was really beautiful. She was the true beauty of the family. After Emily died, Brad got very protective of Willa and me. He got very mixed up. He started calling Willa by the wrong name. He started calling her Emily. Soon after, then he started telling people that Willa was dead, even when she was standing right there in the room. We didn't know what to do with Brad. He was so mixed up. We tried to get him to a doctor, but he refused." "Here are the Cokes. Pay now, please," the waitress interrupted. Corey pulled out his wallet and found $2 bills. Anna tore the paper off the straw and greedily drank her Coke almost to the bottom without taking a breath. "Go on, please," Corey urged. "The story just gets worse," she said. A single large tear formed in each eye. Her eyes looked like 2 blue lakes, Corey thought. Brad kept confusing Willa and Emily. He kept saying Willa was dead. Then one horrible day, it happened. Willa was killed. She fell down the basement stairs. Corey groaned aloud. "How awful!" Brad was home at the time. He said it was an accident. Willa was carrying some clothes down to the basement, and she just slipped and fell. But Mom and I never believed him. We suspected that Brad had pushed Willa. First, you see, he was telling people that Willa was dead, and then she really was dead. We were so frightened. We were terrified of Brad, of what he might do next. But we had no one else to support us. Dad left when we were little. He just took off. Mom was too sick to work and too proud to take welfare. We had no one but Brad. So what could we do? We had to believe the story that Willa's death was an accident. "So they moved to Shadyside?" Corey asked. "No, not yet. This was still last spring. Brad seemed better for a while, but then his mind became confused again. He started telling people that I was dead. I was so scared, I didn't know what to do. Was Brad going to kill me next? I was terrified every day." "I don't believe this. I just don't believe it," Corey said, offering her his Coke since she had finished hers. She took a long sip. "Somehow Mom got the strength to insist that we move. We moved here to Shadyside. We hoped the new surroundings would help snap Brad out of his shock, his confusion, but it hasn't helped. He keeps telling people that I'm dead, and at the same time, he's terribly overprotective. He won't let me go out or have dates or anything. Some days he won't even let me go to school." "So that explains it," Corey said, bored himself then to her. The dreadful details of the story was still spinning through his mind. This poor girl is living in a nightmare, he thought. I've got to find a way to help her. We've got to get Brad out of the house. But then he remembered something. "Hey, wait a minute," he said. "What?" She looked as if she were dreading about what he was going to say next. "I saw a newspaper clipping from Melrose. It said that you were dead. It had a picture and everything." "Oh?" She flushed. Her hands gripped the edge of the Formica tabletop. She was making hard. She didn't seem to have an answer. "Oh, yes. I remember that newspaper thing now," she said, her normal color returning. "I guess I blocked it. Isn't it horrible? Can you imagine seeing your own obituary in a newspaper?" Brad claimed that the newspaper got it all wrong, but I think Brad just couldn't face Will's death, and so he told him it was me. Corey shook his head in disbelief. Corey, I'm so frightened all the time, Anna said, grabbing his hand in hers. I don't know what to think. Is Brad confusing me with Emily? Is he confusing me with Willa? Since he's telling people I'm dead, does it mean he plans to kill me too? I'm really scared, especially now that my mother's visiting her sister. Brad and I are alone. Corey just stared back at her, at the soft tears forming along the rims of her beautiful eyes, at her golden hair. He didn't know what to say. It was such a sad and frightening story. Suddenly, she leaned across the tabletop and pulled his face close to hers. She began to kiss him, gently at first, and then harder. Then, just as suddenly, she stopped and pulled back, her face filled with horror. Corey turned around in the booth to see what she was looking at. There was Brad outside the front window, his face pressed to the glass, a look of fury on his face. I've got to go, Anna said, her face filled with panic. She leapt up from the booth and disappeared out the back door of the restaurant. Corey turned to the front. Brad hadn't moved from the window. He was staring straight ahead at Corey, his face frozen in hatred and rage.